Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond Recovery. I have somebody coming back on the show for the third time, and a good friend of mine. And the last time she was on, we were talking all things creative, and we have something that we wanted to go over today. It was her 1-year sober birthday yesterday at time of recording. Her name is Kaitlynn Mika. Kaitlynn, how are you today?
I'm good. So glad to be back.
Yeah, great to have you back. Yes. I've enjoyed, we had so just to run down anybody that wants to go back and check it out in the back catalog, we have, your sober story, so to speak, the origins. And our second podcast that we did, I want to say a few months ago now, we were getting into like the importance of creativity, and we have a like an art therapy group for those in sobriety on Instagram, creative.recovery. So we got into just sort of riffing on that idea, just all things creative and finding your creative voice in adulthood after, so often it gets put by the wayside, into adulthood and dismissed and so forth. So I thought that was a really wonderful conversation we had. And here we are. Congratulations on your 1-year sober birthday yesterday. Yeah, let's get into it. How are you feeling? Let's just start with that. How is it feeling, day 366, so to speak?
Yeah, 366 into my second year.
Yes.
It feels a lot of things. Definitely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of feels, and you can put expectations on what the day is going to feel like, and then it comes and you realize that this is why you don't future cast and you don't put expectations on what things are going to feel like, because yes, I feel great. I feel empowered. I feel proud of myself. I feel accomplished. I do feel all of those things that I expected. And then on top of it, the weekend going into it, one, the gloomy time of year. Two, there was definitely an uneasiness going in, and it was very much in my body. And even now talking about it, I can feel it, where I get that tightness in my chest and the flutters in my stomach. And I start to have a lot of like memories flood in of the last day of drinking, and even, times before that, because I did the 6-month stretch in the beginning of 2021. And the beginning of 2021. And if you want to know more on that story, you can go back and listen to the other podcast, because it's all on there. And so a lot of those memories came back of like the second 6 months, and like, why did I go back? And I could have been at 2 years. And it was like, just, there was a sense of like, yeah, I'm proud of myself. Now let's move on. Yeah, I'm proud of myself, but I could have done this, and like trying to like diminish it. And at the same time, I know where that comes from. I know that I am harder on myself than I would be on anybody else. And as much as I've done work to change that, it's still there. So Saturday and Sunday, I definitely had like that, like this was my last weekend drinking. And on Sunday I had the anxiety afterwards, and so that uneasiness was there. Now Monday came, and those feelings really did subside, and it was like, all right, I have this whole world of possibilities. Like, I've done this whole year, I'm gonna continue. And there was a lot of cheerfulness and happiness and accomplishment, definitely. And I know that I said to you that it felt like I was standing like at this hole in the ground, and I could feel like magic coming out of it, but I couldn't see what was in there. I couldn't see the bottom of it. And I knew that I was going to jump, and I was scared to jump, and I knew that I was going to, and that it was going to be amazing. And that's where I'm at, is that, I don't necessarily know like where the next path is. And I also know that that's okay to not know. I do have some really cool things that I'm working on and that I'm really excited about. And the rest I'm allowing. Allowing's been a big word of mine, especially these last few months. So really focusing on that. And even, when the different feelings come up and that kind of thing, like allow them to be there. Because usually if I fight the feelings, they try to fight back, and they stay around a lot longer, where if I allow them to be there, then they do what they need to do, and they're a lot quieter.
Yeah, and I want to get into that for sure. I mean, that's work that you and I are both doing, and in the group that we're doing as well. It's a big focus on that. I want to circle back to just comparing. Like it's interesting that it shows up in your body, some of these, and great on you for having that self-awareness, calibrated as such that you can identify that is the uneasiness that's being created, is perhaps repetition or those feelings that were hung on to for the past year, and just like calendar date year over year, that final weekend, right? Which is obviously, and I would like to get into that because, we're not going to rewind, because as we mentioned, we have your origin story earlier, but I would like to rewind to that final weekend of drinking that you had in now my year's getting like 2022. It's funny, because as soon as you get in the new year, it's like, hold on, which year was that again? So yeah, 2022. With that final weekend, and what of that final weekend residual wise was showing up this past weekend for you?
Yeah. The final weekend. So I had, the first time I stopped drinking, had pretty much lost control of like my emotions, and I was drinking to numb, and drinking to shut off that voice. And then I was ending up like more emotional and more dark, and just very unlike myself at my core. Like I describe myself as bright and a light, and I was the complete opposite of that the first time I stopped drinking. So the weekend of, I was doing dry January. Like I had set that goal for myself. I had also become really consistent in the first 6 months of 2021. So to set that goal for myself, and then it was like I was going out to lunch, and I decided to have wine halfway through, and it was like that in itself, like I didn't really notice it when I was doing it. I noticed it now. Like it was like, what, like that was, I had already gone back to what I was using alcohol for before. And it was a very, very fast thing that happened. Like it was like right when I started again, I was like, ooh, like I like this, or like, perceived like this.
Sure.
Or like, it felt like I could relax the same way it felt in the beginning when I started drinking. So,
yeah.
And then all of a sudden I was, not remembering nights and getting sad again. And, so yeah, that final weekend, we went out to lunch. I had wine. I came home. I was home by myself. I kept drinking wine. And then we were going out for our friend's birthday. So it was another like drink all day thing, which, those were a lot of times the days that ended really bad, because it was like 12, 13 hours of drinking. And then, yeah, like what do you, expect to happen at that point?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I was with my family, and it was late at night, and we went back to my parents' house, and I just got really sad, and I was, like emotions that weren't authentic, and like they were there, but they were much more amplified. And, I felt like I was definitely trauma bonding in a sense. And, yeah, I was taking on other energies. And I just wasn't authentic to me. And that's the big thing, is like, I felt like I had really found myself and like really created myself in a sense. And then, I had completely given that back away. And I don't blame alcohol for all of it. And at the same time, alcohol is for me, a big like numbing agent. Like that is what I was using it for. That's what I used food for a lot. Like I had that, that switch, I guess is the way I would describe it. And that switch was turned all the way back on that weekend. So, I mean, I woke up the next morning and, thought to myself, like, what am I doing? Who do I want to be? Like, what is this? Like, I'm completely slipping back into these old patterns, these old habits. So I think that that's what the emotion was that was coming up. Like, it was like, it was like that. Like, it was like, for anybody that's ever had a drinking dream, it was similar to that, where like I wake up with my heart racing, and I am super anxious, and it was very much like that Sunday scary feeling was happening a year later.
Yeah. Right. Which is it's fascinating. And, it makes sense though, too. It's like this unresolved, in a sense, right? I mean, you have resolved it now, but like the year over year thing, there was like this blip in the radar that remained in your body. If it seems like, I'm hearing you say, and it's kind of this cool point of like redemption, or a way to resolve or release it. If you look at it like a year later, like to the day, to have that sort of release, and just to be aware of it, which is really, really neat. Really neat experience, I'm sure it was. And speaking of the experience, there is a lot of layers to a day like that day, especially when we're talking about like the you and I, and the group that we're in, talk a lot about focusing a lot more on the journey versus destinations, enjoying a process versus achievements, or finding a balance, right, between the two. So I can see, and I remember us texting about this, where that would come up as like, okay, am I going to, like, how can I celebrate this as a destination when, and then you're hearing all these other things and probably feeling it, and processing it. Like, although, there's that second year, like there's a lot to do with, people that fall off the wagon after 1 year, right? Because they've done the year and they've gone through all the different holidays, and like, there's still something missing, they've done that. And there's this achievement. They're like, what now? What next? So there's all these different things there are, I'm imagining coming through your mind in that one day. The one thing that stood out to me though is like the diminish it. And you're like, I know where that comes from. And I'm wondering, did you identify that as an old pattern, or a person that you've interacted with in the past that, don't get too high on your horse, right? Was there something like that where did the diminishment part come from?
I tried to stay small for a lot of my life. I tried to be invisible. I thought it was easier that way. I thought it was easier to blend in. I thought, I mean, I'm sure I've talked about it on the past shows, like my negative self-talk, and the way that I treated myself, and the things that I said to myself. Like, of course I would be self-conscious because I was saying terrible things.
Yeah.
So I really believe that I have a hard time being like, oh, look at me, look at my accomplishment, I'm proud of myself. And not that it had to be like that, but even for me, it's like, okay, yeah, that's cool, and move on and continue on and get to, just stay small. And as much as I have done to change that and put myself out there, and I'm putting my story out there, that voice still creeps in.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's interesting. I imagine that there was pretty much any version of yourself surfaced or came to the 1 year party, shall we say, yesterday. Was that safe to say?
Yeah. And it's funny because I just didn't expect it. And I'm going to say that, even though I'm also telling you that I don't believe in expectations. And at the same time, those expectations were there. And yeah, every version came, and it's amazing. I mean, the inner child was there, the inner teenager was there, like,
yeah.
And they're all proud of me. All of the versions are proud of me. It's just, they all have something to say too.
Yeah. Right. They have their take on it,
Exactly.
Yeah. Very cool. So yeah, it's, here we are 24 hours into year 2. You have mentioned, and I want to get into the visual. I always like visuals, and you're good, storyteller and such. So, and just bringing up that visual of like, looking over the edge, there's this, perceived magical hole, but it's still dark and it's still a little bit frightening, but there's some excitement to it as well. So I definitely want to get into that. Before we do those, there's like thoughts on year 2. Like, it's, there is, there's a lot to be said for that. Like in sports, I know you're a sports watcher. There's like the sophomore curse for bands, for like a professional athlete that's rookie of the year. And then it's just like, man, the second year, there's so much expectation. So what a great way to have led into it. You just mentioned the word expectation. How are you approaching this? Like mindset wise, what are you, I guess what are your intentions? If there's no necessarily expectations other than the not drinking, I imagine. Pretty baseline there. What would be like your intentions for year two?
Well, definitely expressing myself is a big one. That was a big one for January or the new year in general. So that voice that was silenced or silenced itself, that's a big one. Also, yeah, I could definitely see how the sophomore curse would be a thing. And I'm very thankful for the community that I have that you created. Because that is a big reason that I'm able to set intentions. I mean, or that I can do it easier because I've learned so much more about myself. And so doing like that work on myself and learning who I am and learning who my inner child is and learning who, you know, my inner teenager is and what they wanted and what is still a part of me and what's really like me at my core has been huge. So like I always love to write, you know, and I let go of that. So I'm writing again. And you know, it's things like that, like to do more of like what really speaks to me and less of the grind because getting lost in the grind is a big part of why alcohol played the role that it did.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm hearing, you know, like a degree of balance out of that too, like the removing certain elements of, like the grind to me is like, you know, work for the sake of work sometimes, you know, spinning your tires a lot of the time and feeling unfulfilled to a degree that there is the need for a mechanism such as a, you know, or a crutch, such as, you know, substance or whatnot, right? Just to numb that out, the feeling that you are just spinning your tires, or there is like some degree of arbitrary, you know, nature behind your work, and the fact that you're not listening to your intuition and not feeling that fulfillment. So yeah, I get that. I love the word expression too. And, you know, I like having the just want to riff on it a little bit with you, like the distinction between, you know, the way I expressed myself 10 years ago, 15 years ago, before I had done this inner work, came out in very volatile. I just didn't know how to, you know, I didn't know how. I thought expressing myself was great. I had the freedom to express, and oftentimes it was in a either subconscious, compulsive way, very reactionary. Honestly, I could be an asshole sometimes, right? Looking back on it. And now that I have done all of this, I'm much more comfortable by saying that I'm willing to express myself because I know it's going to be conscious expression as opposed to this like subconscious, weird, distorted from substances, almost lashing out of expression, right? So there's a good distinction that I'm making recently, you know, with expression, because, you know, expression that's just been unchecked there's a lot of the world's problems are because of that. People feel the need to like voice their opinion on social media, right? And there's all these weird arguments and other, you know, very divisive topics that we're not going to get into, I promise. So just on my side of the fence is what I felt the need to do for me to be able to express myself in a positive manner was to do all this work and then be able to express myself in a much more conscious way than I did, you know, 10, 15 years ago. So what does the word expression mean to you now? And how is it if it has changed for you?
Yeah, it's funny that you describe yourself as an asshole because I have described myself as I definitely used to be a brat.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so same. And yeah, it's changed so much. And like there were a lot of things that like came out when I was drinking were like the sad, and I talk about it and I'm like, oh, it was like a Jekyll and Hyde thing, but it really wasn't at times. Like it was I was expressing it much more intensely than what I meant to or
Right.
than what it was. And there was a lot of it that was there. And I was pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it down. And then the expression would come out when I was normally, I didn't even remember saying the things that I would say. Right.
Okay.
So, yeah. So it was like, you know, heavily intoxicated. That's when I'm expressing myself. That drunk tongue speaks a sober mind, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's a big thing, is that like I express myself as me now, which is nice. And even sober, I could still be a brat. Like I definitely learned manipulation is coming, that might be a strong word, but
Mhm.
how to, yeah, I mean, manipulate situations in my favor. So yes,
Mhm. Yeah.
definitely, um, that's there. And now it's like, I'm really not trying to get anybody else to do anything. Like everybody else is in their life, on their journey, and I'm on mine. And my expression is take out the just, is expressing what mine is, and that
Mhm.
I'm going to stay on mine. And I described it before. I don't know if I said it on your show or not, but like that I felt very much like I was a piece of other people's lives. And I didn't really have like my own anything. Like it was like, oh,
Mm.
I'm a friend, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm a sister. And now I have like all these things that are so me and that I do and that I focus on. And I, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 and spend
Mhm.
3 hours with just myself. And
Mhm.
so yeah, my expression is really important to my journey, and what I'm gonna do. And that's where I take it now. It's not so much like you need to do this for me or you need to do this for you, even like it was in the beginning of my sobriety.
Mm.
It's like
Mhm.
I need this for myself, and you do
Right.
you, and this is what I'm gonna do.
Right. Yeah, that's so cool. And to be able, it's so freeing and empowering to get to a stage where you're feeling like that and consistently being able to do that, right? Which is practice, and which is like that isn't intentional. That's conscious choice and decision making that you're, you're going that route. And I think it's empowering to, other people in your life, regardless if they clue into that right away, that you're showing up differently, and there's still, again, there's the key word, allow, right? By doing that, you are still allowing them to be all of them, and it's there isn't the
So important.
right. And the other manipulation is kind of one of these words that generally has like this nefarious feel to it, whereas like, there is good manipulation, right? Like I dare say, like at times coaching can be a form of manipulation, guiding, like a manipulation to help somebody see, where they need to go, right? So in a sense, that can be, construed as a positive, manipulation, where granted, also coaching should just be like an objective, you know what I mean? Or should take out the should. There oftentimes will be just an objective reflection to the person
Sure.
to be able to help them see what's already inside them. But there can definitely, be a little bit of like, manipulation to like, you just look over there, just, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's funny though, right? Because manipulation to me, for the longest time was this, like, yeah, smoke and mirrors, you know what I mean? There's some nefarious intent behind it. But yeah, just wanted to bring that up. That's because you were kind of like, well, I don't know about manipulation there, but there can be good manipulation as well.
That's very true. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, translating words is manipulating words, really, when it comes into it,
Right.
right?
There you
Yeah.
go.
So
Perfect. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, good point. Good call. Well, tell me a little bit more about the magic jump, right? So we're on the journey. You're at the stage of the journey where there's this like, this it's not even a crossroads, because a crossroads would be potentially a lot easier than diving off of a cliff into this perceived magic dark hole, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, like what is that? What do you think that's representing to you? Is it too early to tell? Are you still kind of, peeking over the
On
the
the
edge there?
edge.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like I think I'm like I don't know, I might have jumped. I'm
Mm.
like I'm somewhere in between, like right on
Yeah.
the edge, and I jumped.
Right. Right.
And yeah, it's hard to tell. It's hard to say. And it represents a lot of freedom. And the hole, or the cave, or whatever I'm jumping into,
Mm-hmm.
is mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
it's like I've been in this, like, I don't know, realm, box, like whatever. I've put myself in this place, and this is happening right now. So
Mm. Yeah.
because like
Cool.
I've had these thoughts of like, oh, like do I want to move away? Like, and it's like it comes up in meditation, right? Like, do I
Mm-hmm.
move away or be somewhere different? And I think that whole is representing that somewhere different, that place that's mine. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's terrifying because I've only recently come into realizing that I have a mind and that I have a journey and that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just, I mean, I used to say it like, even in high school when I was trying to be invisible, like I would say like, I feel like I was put on this earth to make other people smile. Like that was something that I said often. And now
Yeah.
it's like, this is like my place to smile, you know, like it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go in this magic cave
Mm-hmm.
hole and I'm going to write and I'm going to dance and I'm going to sing
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to color and I'm going to name the birds in my yard and I'm going to, you know, like, and I'm going to be me. And like everything else, like the grind, right? The things that were so front facing, like the
Yeah.
job and, um, I mean, really the job and like just
Mm-hmm.
like real everyday things that, you know, the housekeeping. I was a big, like, I really wanted to decorate my house and was super big into that. And like the reality TV, like I can barely watch any TV anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this is silly. So like it's like I'm jumping into this place that like has all this. It's like my zone. It's my
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. Right. Right. There's still the like an unknown element to it, even though there's some comfort. There is still like which to me that like that represents like surrender, and surrender in the sense that like let's make sure that we're translating surrender properly, or in the way that we're talking about it, because there's like surrender like in there again where it can be like this negative connotation of I've given up, but it's like it's different than that. Surrender is to me it's like it's partners with like allowing, right? Like surrendering is just like not feeling tense anymore, like in my body, just like not being on edge all the time, not being on the defense all the time, and just still being pleasant in the in the face of all life experience, without feeling the need for like preference or bias or like to, yeah, I don't know how else to describe it, but that would be like my surrender. And I can visualize it, in meditation, and I do have things that I know will come up the other side if I sit in certain things, but it's still a little bit frightening to get to that stage where I'm comfortable. I guess that's the point. I'm not going to be comfortable doing that, letting go, fully allowing, or, yeah, or finding that space where I can, just let go. Like I've had moments of it. And then I very much want to get some kind of control again, because I just get very uncomfortable and frightened. So I'm hearing like just the darkness, the jumping off. There's like some trust, some faith, in something outside of yourself that still has to be there, but ultimately it's leading you further into yourself. So that seems, so yeah, I can see where it's like simultaneously, like frightening and exhilarating.
Yeah. It's destinationless.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
It's
cool.
a journey. It's like I'm gonna like jump in there and just float around or something. Yeah, like it's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
yeah. Feel
Yeah.
my emotions and yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's cool. That's cool. That's really neat. They had the that visual like on the day of. And speaking of visuals, you had like a certain bird come and visit you that
I
day as
did.
well, right? So let's talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that.
Well, it's that's so crazy because I was thinking about it and I was like, I saw there were hawks and I actually saw one that day and that was the closest. That one was like right outside my home office window.
Mm-hmm.
And like looking in my window at me and and then like took off and flew and like swooped down. And yeah, so that was super magical. And then, so that was Monday, yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And then Saturday, I saw a hawk again, very close. And he was sitting on a fence post and we drove by. And then an hour and a half later, we drove back by and he was still there
Oh
and
wow.
moving. So like
Yeah.
definitely a real hawk.
Yeah.
And then like
Yeah.
I looked, I'm like, is it
Yeah.
fake? Is that like one of those decoys?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Totally.
then yeah, and then Friday I had one flying like right alongside my car. So it was like the whole weekend I'm seeing these
Mm.
hawks super, super close.
Yeah.
So yeah, and they're all about, I mean, I looked up, they have a lot of different meanings. The one that I saw, there were a few that I saw that were very consistent, and
Yeah.
one was about expansion and growing in life, and how you're about to go into a period of a lot of expansion. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Very
I
cool.
saw some stuff that said that that they represent us solitary, so like being alone.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
And I am very much in an introvert stage right now. I like my alone time. I talked about that. I get up at in the early hours of the morning, and I've said that I feel like it's because it feels like the rest of the world is asleep, and I have that
Yeah.
time to myself, and I can meditate, and I can write, and I can go for walks and do what I want to do. And there's very few other people around.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very much a reconnection to myself. And I also know that I've realized lately how depleted I let myself get, and I let my battery get,
Mm.
and how empty I let my cup get. And even with all the work that I did in this last year, like there was a lot of like it was enough to not drink, right? So like,
Mm-hmm.
not that I didn't do a whole lot of other work too. And like that was like the main focus. Where like,
Yes. Yes.
so now it's like, okay, like there's like so much deeper work and deeper like meaning for me. And I want to go after it. And
Yeah.
that's the exciting part. And it's scary because it's very different from like what I've known. And I spent, the I mean, all of my 20s drinking. So like, I mean, you and I have talked about this where I feel like a lot of like my early adulthood development, I shut off or like didn't let
Mm.
happen. So I'm very much
Yeah.
going back into this place where I feel like I am that like young 20-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm working on figuring out like who I really wanted to be as an adult and doing that.
Right.
And like my full-time job, like all of that, like it's there, I'm successful at it, but it's so much less of like a defining thing for me than it used to
Mm.
be. And
Mm-hmm.
now the stuff I do like extracurricular is what makes me to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. I like the distinction between, yeah, that first year where it's like you're building that foundation. It's like the first year is all about getting through a year and getting through like we talked about earlier, getting through the first Christmas, getting through that first weekend, that there's a big family event that happened for, for your brother, right? And which was covered in the first podcast. And and Thanksgiving and all, and those are all like back to back to back, your first birthday, which is, we're coming up on the birthday now, but so that was one of the first things you had to go through. Summertime, all these different things, right? So now you're a year in, and it's like, okay, so have that as like the foundation, and now you're doing all this extra work on top of that, always basing it on that first foundation of that first year of sobriety, right? And that's how I remembered mine. And that's why I love the group that we're in. Well, one of the many, many, many reasons is that I get reminded that people are in various stages, and I'll be kind of going off on what I feel is like a tangent about something, and then somebody just reminds me of those, Darcy, yourself, or whoever else, that echoes back or that attaches to that sobriety. Like, I used to do this because I was drinking. I'm like, oh yeah, I have to kind of snap out of it because like I'm, coming up on 4 years. So it's great to have that it's so grounding to have that reminder that like this work is all based on that foundation of that first year. That's how it, I very much view it. So I'm kind of curious if that's, how your sort of take on it.
Definitely. And yeah, and it's like the first year, like I could have, I don't want to say just, I could have stayed sober and not focus on any other healing, and that still would have been amazing, right?
Right.
So yeah, and now, yeah. And I mean, even if the next 5 years, that's all I do, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, there's a foundation now. It's like, okay, I've rebuilt this. I know who I am. I've started to scratch the surface of figuring out all of those years that I say that I feel like I lost is the wrong word and I'm going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel like I lost, or that I feel like I delayed myself in.
Delayed. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because yeah, now like even that 1 year, I mean, I said it, I feel like I learned more about myself in the last year than I did in the previous 10.
Right.
Because I was authentically connected and I was feeling everything all the way through. And I mean, there were times where, the feeling it was hard. Like the not drinking was really for me the easy part. It was sitting
Mm.
with myself,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
listening to those voices in my head and listening to.
There we go. Froze up a bit. I was like right at the listening to the voices in my head and listening to.
Okay. Yeah. So I would. Oh, so yeah, I started sitting with myself. I started listening to myself. I started listening to the voices in my head. I started feeling everything that I was feeling. And, um, you know, thankfully I had done a little bit of the work before, or a lot of it of the work before. And so I had
Mm.
a bit of a foundation to go back to.
Yeah.
And this was like the first time that I said, like, I'm indefinitely not drinking, and
Mm.
I know that I'm happier without it. And was very strong about, maybe even too strong about, like, the way I was going to be when I went into it. So yeah, definitely like built a foundation, definitely learned a lot, definitely embraced the fact that I've always been highly feeling and highly sensitive. Um, my mood can change multiple times in a day, and
Mm.
I love that. Like, I don't want to change that at all. So,
Mm.
but in the beginning it was like I could it got to the point that I could feel like where that I want to turn this off is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um yeah, knew that I could very quickly be like, no, you don't. Like, that's the whole point of what you're doing. And like I could talk myself into and out of things. Um, and yeah, it was a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. So that there's that challenge, and I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to that, myself included. And there's the challenge of, and this is like this comes up for a lot of people, is the challenge of like how to interact with people. There's like the concern, oh, it's social settings will never be the same again. You're going to disappoint people, right? And so you went through all that, and you had mentioned on the first podcast we did, there's with the family history and such, and the family get-togethers. You imagine they were going to be challenging, and they were at times, right? And so yeah, well, a little bit about that, like, so that you were figuring out how to get reacquainted with yourself, your true self. How was it in the dynamic of social settings and family dynamic?
Um, in the beginning, it was tough. It was really tough. Yeah. Because I still tried to be a part of everything. I
Mm.
still wanted to be there. I still all the event, even through the summer. Like, it was like I had a really hard time saying yes to myself when it meant saying no to somebody else. A really
Yeah.
hard time.
Yeah.
And I was, like, I had give written the story for myself of the party friend, the fun friend, the one that is usually the most intoxicated. Like, I had written all of this for myself. Like,
Yeah.
like, if you want to take shots, grab Kaitlynn, she'll take shots with you. Like, that was me, like,
Yeah.
definitely a party girl.
Yeah.
So it was a big shift for people. And I think there's a lot of people that were like, yeah, okay, we'll see you in a few months. I
Mm.
think there was, you know, a lot of people that feared the fact that it was a forever or a
Right.
very long time or
Yeah.
an indefinite thing. There was definitely a lot I miss drinking with you. There was like this sad look in people's eyes. So like I did get that. And at the same time, I had a lot of support too. It's easy to look at, you know, the few people that are disappointed. That might even be the wrong word, but just like less show their support in a different way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot easier to look at that than it is to look at all of the support and all of the love and all of the people that you have around you that are like super in your corner,
Mm.
which I had a lot of. And um, that's something honestly that's been in the last like couple days that I've really started to turn around to. That is like, it's okay if some people aren't, like that's fine,
Yeah.
because you're gonna find your tribe, and
Hmm.
you get to be your tribe too, and you get
Yeah.
to do what you want to do for you, and you know what's authentically best for you.
Hmm.
So whether it's friends or family or whatever situation. And when I went into, you know, I don't know if I talked about this on your show or a different show, but I like we stopped at a friend's house, and or like we didn't really know the people very well. And I had an non-alcoholic beer and a koozie. We were on a boat. We live on a small lake.
Hmm.
And so I got off with my beer, and we ended up staying there for like 45 minutes or something. And the girl kept asking me, like, do you want a beer? Do you want a beer? And I just kept being like, I have one, I have one. And then at one point she like went in the house and got a Coors Light for me, and just like handed it to me. And I was like, I don't know what to do. So I just took it, and I'm standing there with this like open, like putting it like, you know, like just like turning around and
Yeah.
like pretending, and like
Yeah.
it was so silly. And then I'd hand it to my husband, and he would like chug some of it and then hand it back to me. And I was just like
Yeah. Yeah.
so scared to say no, because I was so scared that one, that she was already intoxicated, and I didn't want to like get shit, and I just wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like, and now I'm much better at that. And
Mm. Hmm.
I don't drink are some of my favorite words actually now. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was, I was just very caught off guard. And there was a little bit of that in the beginning where it was like, put a drink in a koozie, nobody knows the difference. That's a really
Yeah.
good tip though too. Like
Yes.
have a
Yes.
drink in your hand, use a koozie,
Yeah.
or you know, put some ice in a glass, and nobody's
Yeah.
gonna ask you, you know.
Yeah.
And if they do, tell them what you want to tell them.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
And no is a complete answer. It's a big
Hmm.
one, big one.
Mm. Hmm.
You can say no, thank you too, if you want
Yeah.
to. Also a complete answer.
Yes.
Um, definitely, definitely breath control.
Mm. Hmm.
And I can leave and I can say no, and I do say no, and I do leave. And you know what? Like people don't have to understand you, and you don't
Mm.
have to understand people. And I hope I didn't freeze again. Did I freeze?
No, you're
Okay.
good. You're
Okay.
good. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, you don't have to understand people, and you just love,
Hmm.
you know, you can still love people without understanding them. In fact, it can be easier to love people when you
Mm.
let go of the need to understand them.
Yeah. Right.
So that's been huge for me, is like, I don't need to like, again, it goes back into like their journeys, theirs, your journey's yours.
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah. So, um, yeah, I've been able to really just redefine those situations and those relationships by realizing that I get to make my decisions, and I get to do it with love for myself first.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Like reprioritizing yourself, self-care, and yeah, all great advice. Yeah. I love that the koozie one, and just having like a drink in in your hand. That was a big one for me, was just having like some near beers, and still like the whole mechanism of like opening a can. And I'm always gonna like that. I'm not gonna fight it,
Yeah.
honestly. My brother and I had that conversation. It's like, people that like us, that like drinking anything is going to be a reward. That's just like the whole, you know what I mean? Like putting an exclamation, or like a nice sunny day or something. I'm always going to be seeking some form of beverage. I like the popping of the can, always have, like the sound,
Mhm.
right? So, why fight it? And it's like, that's a great advice. Having a drink nearby, the koozie so nobody notices, the ice with the club soda. I mean, as far as they know, it could be vodka, right? you know,
Right.
just little things like that. And yeah, I had that a few times too, where it's like the universe testing you, literally putting an open beer in your hand somebody gave you, and it's like, you know, 12 inches away from like your sobriety going out the window, and you can
Yeah.
feel it, and it's like I kind of went into shock a little bit, and then part of me, you know, the voice started like doing the quietly, but there was some negotiations happening, you know, like, well, you know, it's out of the lake is, you know, what stays at the
What's
lake, you know,
one beer gonna do?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
what happens to the lake stays at the lake. All of a sudden it's like Las Vegas or something, you know, it's like all these
Yeah.
strange, yeah,
Yep.
strange things came up. So yeah, really good stories, great insight, great advice. um yeah, I'm just trying to think what else I want to talk about. Like, you know, it covers a lot, just like the self work that you've done. Let's get into, yeah, I definitely want to get into breathing, because I know breathing is a big part of both yours and my, you know, just the coaching certifications that we've been through. The work that we do has a lot to do with awareness of your breath, taking deep breath, daily breath work, whether it's 5-10 minutes, you know, incorporating into meditations and such. So what role did breathing and being aware and conscious of your breathing play in this last year?
All of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, I don't know if I want to make that statement. It would have been a lot
Mm,
harder to stay sober if
sure.
I did not have my breath under control.
Yeah.
Because, oh man, I was thinking about it on my walk today, and there was definitely some breathing going on my walk today. I mean, obviously, but like some
Mm,
intentional breathing.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
and yeah, I was definitely a shallow breather. Like I was breathing in my chest all day long,
Yeah.
fast, short breaths, and exhausting myself and
Right.
stressing myself out even more with my breath. And like, if I have my breath under control, there is no point because I can do everything that drinking did for me with
Yeah.
my breath.
Yeah.
I can, you know, and I heard this that like drinking really like all right, I've heard this a few times now that like drinking
Mm.
gives you what was the quote that I heard one time? It was like drinking never actually made me feel happy. It gave me the
Mhm.
illusion that I'd be happy in 15 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But breathing and walking gives me
Mm.
that
Yeah.
that happy, that
Yes.
clear, that calm, that
Yeah.
relaxation.
Mm.
Um so yeah, and the awareness factor of it, the clarity, the focus. I mean, all of that is like there's nothing to drink about, you know, like and um also like some of the more like intense breath work and that kind of thing can give me a lot of like very spiritually awakening visualizations,
Mm.
can connect
Mhm.
so many dots, can like it's so much more fun. Like
Mm.
it's so much more fun. And
Yeah.
I can do it at 5 o'clock in the morning and I
Mhm.
can, you know, like or before I go to sleep and it helps me sleep better. Um yeah, I mean that's another thing. Sleep. Like a lot of times like I would drink to I don't want to say I would drink to fall asleep. And there were times where it was like that was my wind down in the evening, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So breathing can like do that same like where my brain's firing and ping ponging, and like I like to say,
Yes.
and the thoughts are going back and forth, and um, the breathing can stop that.
Mm.
Where I thought that a bottle of wine could stop that, a
Right.
bottle of wine postponed it,
Mhm.
and then made
Mhm.
it 10 times worse. Where breathing
Yeah.
actually lets me work through it
Yeah.
and work with it and work as it.
Yeah. Smart. Some great insight. Yeah, for sure. All the above. Yeah. I like how you define it. You're like, "Well, it's would have happened, but it would have been much harder, you know." Yeah,
Yeah,
I could see that for sure. You know, I
yeah,
was listening. I had a great interview yesterday. I was telling you about, and the lady was saying, because I was just we were riffing on just patterns and such, and you know, this pattern of, and what brought it up was we were talking about the shallow breathing, and it's like shallow breathing and exhausting yourself, and you know, freezing at times. I'm sure, and I was very much the same way. And you know, she was saying it's like that cortisol or that adrenaline that comes along with that is like a numbing agent as well, in a sense, right? And I was like, oh man, bingo. Like, no wonder I was like finding other ways to numb different things. And no wonder I've used this like pattern of achievement and urgency behind all the work that I do, because it puts me in a stress state. And then that's what's further pushing down these feelings, right? So no wonder I used that same pattern. You know, and then so now when I do get to that stage, like the breathing gets me back in parasympathetic, and yeah, just flips the script, you know, changes the pattern. So you know, for other folks that are, you know, in early sobriety or deep in sobriety, I mean, breathing really is often overlooked, and just sort of, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I used to look at it as like, okay, if my heart's beating, I don't have to think about it. If I'm breathing, which I, you know, I was not very well,
Involuntary.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have to think about it. But man, it's so powerful to think about it and see what great things can come both mentally and in the body, as you mentioned, like what it can do to like have some releases and help you embody some of your affirmations or whatever else you have going on in your meditation. Yeah, we talk about journey, like the thrill of the journey and the excitement and curiosity it comes with the theme of journey. I mean, breathwork journey and sound journey and that kind of thing is like so, you know, hand in hand with that, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I learned that breathing was an involuntary thing.
Yeah.
And nobody ever told me like focus on it. Like
Right.
people did. I shouldn't say nobody ever. It took
Right.
a long time
Yeah.
for people to
Yeah.
tell me to
Yeah.
focus on my breathing. It took the right person to tell me to focus on my breathing. We're like, yeah, you take a deep breath when you're a kid
Sure.
and you're upset,
Totally.
sure.
Yeah.
Like there's so much more to it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
it's
really is.
and like that take a deep breath is the first part of it. So it's like continue on with that into adulthood, right?
Yeah.
If that's
Yeah.
what works to calm the tantrum. Yeah.
Right.
And it takes that like that your nervous system, right? Like that like boiling pot of water feeling, like
Yeah.
where the top's gonna blow off or whatever.
Yes.
And it takes the boil off. Like
Mm-hmm.
it really does. And
Yeah.
you can keep yourself at temperature.
Yeah,
Or it
exactly.
turns the flame off, however you want to visualize it.
Yeah, yeah, or however deep you want to go with it at that stage, at that point in time, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's true
Yeah,
too. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, very cool, very cool. Yeah, great insight. You know, I will wind it up with, you know, if there's quite a few folks going through dry January right now. It was a big thing. I remember like leading into the new year, there were so many cool happenings, you know, like the Times Square was getting filmed, and it was like they didn't want to have open drinks being filmed, which is like, to me, that's like mind-blowing actually, right? And so there's definitely like this whole like sober curious movement, just the sober movement in general, you know, the rise of alcohol-free drinks. You and I have talked about it up here in Canada, went from like O'Doul's and Molson Canadian on the bottom shelf of like the drink aisle to like a 8-foot section of alcohol-free drinks now. And it's just, it really, and that's just in the last few years, right? So really cool to see all of this. So if there's somebody's listening that is like, you know, a year behind you, like they just started January of this year, they're a few weeks in, and now they're listening to you. Here you are, you know, a year and a day into yours. Yeah, what kind of advice do you have for them? And you know, what sort of we've gotten a lot of insight. Just so yeah, just to kind of wrap it all up with a you know, final words of motivation or inspiration or however else.
First of all, I'm proud of you and allow yourself to be proud of you.
Mm.
So take that in.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, you're doing this for you. This is your journey. Remember that. And it's a journey. There is no destination. You're not trying to get to, or maybe you are trying to get to the end of January right now. And
Mm-hmm.
take it moment by moment. Are you enjoying the moments you're in? Do they feel different? Focus on them. What are you feeling? What do you want? Who do you want to be? And how do you create that? Stay in the moment you're in and do what feels authentic to you in that moment.
That's great. And you know, when you open up with like, I'm proud of you, like I am proud of you, you know, get emotional here at the end, but just, yeah, just really great to to work with you the last like 8 months, and yeah, just really proud of everything that you've accomplished, and proud to call you my friend, and yeah, just great talking with you again today, and yeah, great stuff. Yeah, thank you for coming on, and we'll definitely have you on. We have to do part 4. You're like the the first person to get into like unknown territory as far as guests, and I think we've already talked about it, having you as like a recurring guest moving forward, just because of the conversations that we do have. So Kaitlynn, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that you do.
You bet.